Hey, before we jump into this galaxy-shaking tale of loyalty, betrayal, and a bond that defies the stars, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe for more human supremacy stories, and drop a comment telling us, what would you do if an apex predator bowed to you instead of killing you? Let's dive in. The council chamber hovered like a silent judgment above the writhing auroras of a dying star. Inside, 1,000 holographic eyes shimmered, each belonging to a different species, each flickering with an ancient authority that spanned entire empires. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and antiseptic crystal polish. No one spoke. No one dared breathe too loudly. All attention was pinned on the center of the hall where a single figure stood under the crushing weight of countless verdicts. Dr. Elias Rourke shifted his boots on the cold, polished obsidian floor. A human among starborn monarchs and cosmic warlords, he looked like a misplaced insect about to be crushed. His hair was ragged, a wild halo against the sterile white glow, and his eyes gleamed with the restless curiosity that had gotten him into this pit in the first place. A thin line of sweat traced his neck. A voice crackled from above, mechanical yet dripping with contempt. Dr. Rourke of Sol 3. Charged with the manipulation of a Class C apex predator and subversion of the Galactic Preservation Edicts. How do you plead? Elias tilted his head, almost smiling. Not guilty of subversion. Only guilty of survival. A ripple of shock slithered across the chamber. A reptilian diplomat hissed. A crustacean elder clicked its claws in irritation. A gelatinous matriarch sloshed violently inside her containment orb. High Chancellor Nkal, a towering figure of translucent carapace and serpentine arms, leaned forward. His voice quivered the light itself. You toyed with nature's most sacred design. You taught the Corval to disobey. Elias inhaled, his gaze cutting straight through the Chancellor's projection. I didn't teach him to disobey. I showed him a choice. The chamber rumbled as ancient translations echoed across 100 minds. Choice. A word more dangerous than any weapon. A metallic archway behind Elias unfolded like a blooming steel flower. From the shadows stepped the executioner, the Corval. It dwarfed every creature in the hall. Its skin shimmered with midnight scales that shimmered like a field of stars, and its breath fogged in the freezing chamber. Twin eyes like molten sapphires locked onto Elias. Murmurs turned to trembling silence. The Corval was no mere beast, it was a living execution order. Engineered by the Council centuries ago, each strand of its DNA woven with kill directives. No known being had ever survived a Council-issued kill command once the Corval entered the hall. Elias stood firm. He didn't flinch as the predator slithered closer, each claw tap echoing across the marble-like floor. His fingers twitched at his side, remembering every scar, every frantic stitch he had used to heal this creature's wounds. Nkal rose to his full height, his voice a rolling quake. You, Corval of the Council, execute this human. Let his ashes remind every system that the natural order is not to be bent. The Corval inhaled. The chamber lights flickered as its throat rattled, a prelude to the final strike. Sparks danced along the ground, static bending around the predator's shoulders as if the universe itself prepared to collapse into a single violent act. A young insectoid guard in the gallery shivered so hard his exoskeleton chattered. A historian from the Hrothsion clutched her translator node to her chest. In the deepest alcove, a small delegation from a Starshard mining guild began praying to the void. Then it happened. The Corval's talons hovered inches from Elias's face. The entire council leaned forward in unison, drunk on the imminent spectacle of death. Elias whispered, so softly only the predator heard. It's still your choice. The Corval froze. A hush fell so heavy it felt as if gravity itself had thickened. The predator's claws trembled, tiny ripples of energy vibrating off the tips and sizzling onto the ground. One moment stretched into eternity, every heartbeat amplified by the collective fear of 1,000 different species. Elias exhaled. His chest rose and fell as if he had waited centuries for this singular instant. The Corval's eyes flickered, shifting from icy blue to a deep, almost mournful violet. Slowly, impossibly, the creature retracted its claws. Its massive head dipped downward, so low that its obsidian crown nearly touched Elias's boots. With a rumbling sigh that resonated through the bones of every living creature present, it lowered its entire body until it lay curled around Elias's feet. A tremor cascaded through the high tribunal. Voices burst forth like shattering glass. Override the neural protocol, screamed an engineer from the back, his many fingers dancing over an ethereal console. Impossible, howled the fungus-like delegate, spores flaring in chaotic panic. It cannot disobey. Nkala's translucent jaw hung open, unhinged like a broken weapon. Corval, you are commanded. Obey your masters. The Corval didn't move. Its gaze remained on Elias, unwavering. The muscles along its massive back tensed as if ready to shield him from every plasma bolt or claw in the galaxy. Elias took a single step forward, feeling the warmth of the predator's exhalation on his ankles. His voice when it came was not loud, but it carried like a song of defiance. I didn't enslave him. I didn't twist his instincts. I showed him that his life could be his own. One of the council guards, a young male from the crystalline Saroch, stumbled backward, his eyes wide. The words struck deeper than any weapon. Nkala's arms writhed, his entire body flaring with bioluminescence. This is treason against the cosmic design. We cannot allow a singular mind to dictate over the natural order. Elias turned, facing each sector's delegation in turn. His eyes were no longer the eyes of a single human. They were oceans, black holes, stars collapsing into infinite points. Maybe the design was flawed from the start. Maybe freedom isn't chaos. Maybe it's the only true order there ever was. Somewhere in the far rows, a young male diplomat from the aquatic vast collective gasped, dropping his luminescent staff. Another diplomat from the warlike drawl flexed his armored gauntlets in indecision. The Corval chuffed, almost a laugh, the sound echoing like subterranean thunder. Its tail coiled gently around Elias, an unspoken vow. In the control balconies above, red lights began to flash. Defense drones unfolded their wings, weapons humming to life. Commands flickered across shimmering data screens, orders raining down in frantic cascades. Elias placed a hand on the Corval's snout, eyes locked on the encroaching drones. He whispered, "We'll face them together." You always had that choice. The Corval's massive chest expanded, each rib stretching like tectonic plates. Its eyes burned brighter than supernova cores, brighter than any sun that ever rose over human soil. The council chamber transformed into a hurricane of voices and alarms. But in that maelstrom, a single impossible truth hung above all. The apex predator had chosen to bow instead of kill. And in that choice, the entire galaxy shivered on the brink of something no edict or elder had ever foreseen. The Corval shifted, muscles rippling like living mountains. Elias stood beside him, eyes unwavering, spine unbent. A slow, collective dread began to spread among the council members as they realized the predator's loyalty could not be coded, chained, or commanded. Somewhere behind the chaos, a young male technician whispered into his comm, What do we do now?" Another answered, voice quivering, "We watch. We watch the human. We watch what happens when loyalty is not programmed but chosen." Elias felt the Corval's heartbeat beneath his fingers, a deep and ancient rhythm. In that moment he knew the council's foundation had already begun to crack, echoing out through star lanes and diplomatic halls across the galaxy. The universe held its breath. And Elias, standing beside his chosen protector, waited to exhale. The council chamber trembled as the Corval's low growl rumbled through every pillar, every crystal vein in the walls. Above, the command balconies flickered with emergency holograms, each symbol pulsing in urgent red. Elias felt the echo of the predator's heart thundering against his palm. The council, once a monolith of cold certainty, now shifted like a glacier splintering into 1,000 chaotic shards. High Chancellor Nkala's voice rose above the chaos, a shrill, furious scream that rippled across species lines. Override his mind. Activate the psychic dominion relay now. Now. A cluster of technicians scrambled, fingers flickering across ethereal controls. Sparks leapt from overloaded circuits as command signals shot through hidden channels. All around the chamber, psychic amplifiers began to glow, humming with the violent energy of forced obedience. The Corval lifted its head slowly. Its eyes glimmered, no longer sapphire but a deep ultraviolet so intense it seemed to swallow light. It turned its gaze upward toward the control banks, its scales vibrating with a living electricity. Elias felt his lungs constrict as the predator's energy surged, a tsunami of raw defiance. Above them, one technician screamed, "The control links aren't stabilizing. The neural inhibitors, they're disintegrating." Another, his face pale beneath the blue glow of his visor, stammered, "It's rewriting its own synaptic structure. It's refusing the commands. It's impossible." Nkal bellowed in a voice so loud it cracked the viewing barriers. "Nothing is impossible. We created him. He is our blade." The Corval rose to its full towering height, each muscle tensing like a coiled storm. With a single violent shiver, it shattered the psychic chains. Invisible waves of force tore through the room, splintering consoles, ripping banners, sending a dozen guards tumbling through the air like brittle toys. Elias staggered, catching himself on the predator's side. He pressed his forehead against the smooth, starlit scales, whispering words that melted into the creature's hot breath. The Corval shifted, angling its massive body to shield Elias fully from the panicking security drones now pouring into the chamber. In a high balcony, a young male council aide from the insectoid hive of Zant clutched his data rod so tightly it cracked. His eyes darted between Elias and the predator, an awakening horror blooming behind the compound lenses. "What have we done?" he whispered to no one. The Corval's eyes swept over the new attackers. Its maw parted, revealing rows of crystalline fangs that shimmered like jagged mirrors. But instead of striking, it snarled a bone-deep warning. A single sweep of its tail knocked a full platoon of guards off their feet, but no fatal blows landed. Elias's voice cut through the panic like a beam of pure light. "He does not want to kill you. He never did. You made him this way. You forced this existence on him." Nkal screeched, saliva flying from his translucent jaws. "You dare speak of existence? We gave him purpose. We forged him as a symbol of our absolute authority." Elias turned his head, his voice low and razor-sharp. "And you stripped him of choice. You stripped him of soul." A silence punctured the bedlam. Even the most battle-hardened guards hesitated, their rifles trembling. The Corval's deep breaths filled the vacuum left behind by failing commands. In the far wing, an archivist from the crystalline Sarotich delegation pressed a recording node to his lips, eyes wide. "They will hear this story across the void," he murmured. "A weapon with a heart. A human who gave him freedom." The Corval stepped forward, each motion as graceful as a collapsing galaxy. Elias stayed close, matching each step, his hand never leaving the warm scales. Around them, soldiers scrambled, unsure whether to advance or retreat. Then an older male technician, one who had helped design the original Corval neural lattice, stepped forward, tears tracking through layers of ash and sweat on his face. His voice trembled, so thin it barely carried across the chamber. Why him? Why does he listen to you?" Elias paused, his gaze softening for a fraction of a second. "Because I listened to him first." The technician collapsed to his knees, his data gauntlet falling from limp fingers and shattering on the obsidian floor. Behind him, guards began to lower their weapons, eyes darting in silent confusion. The Corval tilted its massive head, scanning the room. It inhaled slowly, then let out a sound that was neither a growl nor a roar, something gentler, like an ancient creature singing to the stars. Nkal roared again, summoning backup drones, his claws slicing the air in violent desperation. "Kill them both. We must maintain control. If the galaxy sees this, our unity is lost." A pair of guards lunged forward. The Corval moved like dark lightning, stepping into their path. Instead of tearing them apart, it pushed them aside, leaving them alive but utterly disarmed. The message echoed in every movement. He could destroy them, but he chose not to. Elias turned, voice firm yet somehow tender. "I will not let you enslave him again. I will not let you erase what he has become." A low hum rose from the walls. Psychic energy conduits started to overload, discharging arcs of violet lightning across the ceiling. Shattered control nodes sparked and burned, sending tendrils of smoke swirling into the air. A young male envoy from the Aquatic Vask Collective, scales glimmering with bioluminescent fear, stepped forward tentatively. His voice was small but resolute. This is not the natural order we were promised. This is tyranny." For a moment the entire council chamber seemed to freeze. The envoy's statement punctured the final thin veil of obedience holding the assembly together. Murmurs spread like wildfire, creeping into the lungs of every observer. The Corval lowered itself once more beside Elias, wrapping its tail protectively around his legs. Sparks danced along its spine, catching the reflections of countless eyes. Elias stood taller than he ever had, his silhouette outlined in the predator's soft violet glow. Nkal screeched, claws scraping against the floor, leaving molten gouges. "You will not destroy millennia of design. You are one man. One insignificant human." Elias's jaw clenched, his voice steady as stone. "I am one man, but so is he. And today he chose." A strangled hiss rose from Nkal's throat. Above them, the last operational drones powered up plasma lances, but before they could fire, a shudder swept through the hall. Small explosions rattled along the upper conduits, sparks cascading like fiery rain. The control network was dying, unraveling in real time. Elias raised his head, feeling the swirl of hot air and ozone, listening to the distant alarms echoing through the spires of the council fortress. In that roaring storm of fear and fury, something gentle bloomed between man and beast, a moment of peace forged in defiance. The Corval's chest rumbled as it pressed closer. Elias rested his forehead against its massive skull, their breath mingling like two stars fusing in a hidden corner of the cosmos. Through the fractured cries and distant warnings, Elias could hear something else, an idea flowering among the other delegates. They were starting to see it, the fragile shape of a universe where power did not come from forced obedience but from shared will. In the corner of the shattered balcony, the insectoid aide trembled. He lowered his staff, turning away from M'Kal. The young Vask envoy stepped beside him. Together they looked down at Elias and the Corval. Slowly, a ripple of movement spread. Delegates began dropping weapons, letting data rods clatter to the floor, pulling off ceremonial armor plates. Even the guards whose seconds before aimed plasma rifles at Elias now looked at each other with lost, questioning eyes. M'Kal screamed, a raw, desperate noise that rattled every crystal panel. "Do not listen. Obey. You are sworn to the council. You will obey." But his voice, once enough to still entire star fleets, now cracked and faded in the echoing chamber. Elias stepped forward again, the Corval flowing beside him like a living shadow. He raised a hand toward the frightened guards. "He could have destroyed every one of you. But he chose not to. Ask yourselves why." Silence spread in waves, thick and heavy, pressing down until each breath felt like inhaling molten iron. The Corval turned its enormous head slowly, scanning each face, each quivering hand, each uncertain heart. A single guard, young and terrified, let his plasma rifle drop with a hollow clang. He fell to his knees, hands spread wide. Others followed, until the entire forward line was a sea of lowered weapons and shaking shoulders. Elias exhaled, the weight of centuries shifting on his shoulders. "This is the first step," he whispered. The Corval curled closer, its rumbling purr rising as if echoing an agreement older than any council law. For one brief instant, the chamber shimmered with a fragile, impossible hope, the idea that even the darkest weapon could choose to protect rather than destroy. And as the alarms shrieked and walls cracked, as the council began to splinter from within, Elias looked into the Predator's eyes and saw a universe waiting to be remade. The choice had been made, and nothing would ever be the same again. The walls of the council chamber convulsed under the weight of 1,000 conflicting signals. Sparks rained like electric snow as conduits ruptured, their humming veins reduced to shrieking arcs of violet flame. Elias felt the Corval's warmth against his side, the creature's heartbeat a powerful rhythm that seemed to steady his own. Above them, holographic banners depicting the council's eternal seal flickered and vanished, dissolving into static as command systems failed one by one. Delegates scrambled from their perches, dropping ceremonial scepters and clambering over each other in terror. Some still clung to the old programming, screaming for obedience, but their voices crumbled in the chaos. A group of armored guards rushed forward, plasma lances hissing in readiness. The Corval turned to face them, its tail sweeping the ground in slow arcs. Elias could feel the Predator's pulse shift, vibrating with an instinct older than any council edict. But he reached out, fingers brushing the scale plates behind its head. "Only if necessary," Elias murmured, his voice low enough that it threaded directly into the creature's mind. The Corval paused, its eyes narrowing on the guards. Its claws flexed but did not descend. One guard, young and already shaking, lost his nerve first. His weapon clattered to the floor as he bolted, stumbling over robes and shattered armor. The others hesitated, caught between drilled reflex and a new rising dread. From the balconies more voices rose. A male delegate from the Zand hive, his mandibles twitching in distress, called out above the static. "Stop this. We have relied on violence for too long. Look what loyalty by choice can create." Another male, a warrior prince from the obsidian-skinned Drawl, leaped onto the railing, his heavy armor ringing against the metal. His voice cut across the entire hall. "We were promised control. They promised a predator that would serve as proof of the council's ultimate dominion. But we see now, dominion is a lie." His words exploded across the room like a comet crashing into a quiet sea. The assembled leaders, once so sure of their unassailable throne, now stared into a chasm they had never prepared to face. The Corval shifted its gaze to each new voice, its iridescent pupils swirling with a light that felt almost like understanding. M'Kal writhed at the center dais, his translucent tendrils lashing the air. "Traitors, you will doom us all. Without the Council's order, the stars will descend into endless war. Elias stepped forward, his boots crunching through shards of shattered data nodes. He didn't raise his voice, instead it flowed softly, yet each word carried weight like the slow drift of a moon across a black sky. Order founded on fear is not stability. It's paralysis dressed in ceremony. This creature is more alive than your entire assembly of decrees. A guard lunged in a last desperate charge, blade drawn and eyes wild with confusion. The Corval intercepted, claws closing around the soldier without crushing him. It set him down gently, the man collapsing in shock, his helmet tumbling away to reveal wide, tear-filled eyes. The chamber fell into a stunned hush. Even the alarms now felt distant, a dying echo rather than a threat. The young envoy from the aquatic Vask collective edged forward, water trickling along his gills as he fought for breath. "Elias," he stammered, "what will happen if we stand against the Council? If we leave?" Elias turned to him, eyes softening, seeing in the envoy the fear and trembling hope of a child discovering the dark for the first time. "Then you live. Truly live. You will have to fight for each choice, each breath, but they will belong to you. Not to this chamber. Not to anyone else." A ripple of motion. Several other young delegates nodded, shoulders rising in a tremor of shared resolve. One by one they dropped their diplomatic badges, the symbols of their servitude hitting the floor with tiny crystalline pings that rang out louder than any gunshot. High above, a technician slammed a last emergency override. Re-engaging failsafe Omega. Disintegration sequence engaged. His voice cracked as the terminal sparked beneath his fingers. The Corval's gaze shot upward, luminous eyes zeroing in on the technician. Without a roar or violent charge, it leaped, claws slicing through a support beam. The technician toppled backward as his console exploded, the override sequence lost forever in the surge of molten sparks. The Predator landed beside Elias again, each movement like a thunderclap. It curled its massive tail protectively around his waist, snout lowering so close that Elias felt the hot gust of each breath. Elias pressed his hand against the scales once more, his expression somewhere between warrior and friend. Nkala's shriek echoed, an animal sound now, stripped of authority and reason. He lashed out at the delegates nearest him, his limbs flailing wildly, knocking one into a pillar so hard the impact reverberated up the walls. The Draal prince leaped from his perch, crashing down with the force of an avalanche. He landed beside Elias and the Corval, armor scorched and cracked but his eyes bright. He tore off his council insignia, crushing it in his gauntlet fist. "We are with you. We will not bow to fear any longer." Elias nodded once. In that single motion, the walls between human and alien, scientist and warrior, dissolved like vapor under a newborn sun. The Corval's pupils expanded, bright as nova flares. Its tail rose, poised to strike if needed, but Elias gave it a gentle push and it settled, a quiet titan choosing restraint again. Around them the chamber transformed. Where once rows of soldiers stood rigid, now knots of rebels formed, huddling together, whispering frantic promises of allegiance and freedom. The old order cracked like a dried husk, flaking away under the weight of something dangerously alive. Elias looked at the sea of terrified faces, his voice resonating like a pulse through vacuum. "You are afraid. You should be. Freedom isn't a safe harbor. It's an endless ocean. But it's yours and that makes it worth every storm." The insectoid aide from the hive finally stepped forward, clutching the remnants of his data rod to his chest. "What do we do now?" His mandibles clicked in a pattern that echoed an old prayer. Elias turned to the Corval, then to the aides, guards, delegates, a constellation of uncertain sparks waiting to ignite. "We leave. We show them the stars are not the council's to own. We carry the story of choice and they will either hunt us or join us. Either way the illusion shatters today." A distant boom shivered through the floor as exterior hangars began sealing off. Somewhere far above, the main gates to the council's orbital docks began closing like a gaping maw. Elias felt the ground vibrate through his bones. He turned to the Corval, eyes bright with a silent question. The creature inclined its head, a massive, slow nod. In that subtle motion, Elias felt an echo of every silent vow they had ever shared. "Then we run," Elias whispered. The Draal prince signaled to his retinue, armor plates snapping into travel configuration. The young Vask envoy moved toward the exits, urging a small group of newly defected guards to follow. The insectoid aide scrambled beside them, still clutching the broken data rod like a holy relic. The Corval shifted its weight, muscles rolling beneath its star-speckled scales. Elias climbed onto its broad back, sliding into the narrow space behind the ridge of its neck. As he settled, he glanced once more over the fractured council chamber. Shattered banners smoldered, glowing like dying embers in a night sky. Nkal bellowed, dragging himself through debris, his tendrils clawing at the ground in a futile chase. You cannot escape. You will not rewrite the galaxy. Elias met his eyes, that desperate abyss of a once immortal tyrant, and felt only pity. I'm not rewriting it, he called back, voice carrying like a blade of light. I'm just giving it back. The Corval lunged forward, its heavy strides cracking the marble floor beneath them. Delegates and guards scrambled aside, some reaching for Elias as he passed, as if desperate to touch the spark of freedom now roaring like wildfire through their minds. They surged through the council's grand archway, pillars shattering behind them. As they crossed into the dock halls, Elias felt the Corval gather itself, legs bunching with impossible strength. With a single colossal leap, they soared over barricades, hurtling toward the last open hangar bay. Alarms howled overhead, metal gates descending like jaws. The Corval landed, skidding across polished steel. Its claws carved deep trenches as it twisted, dodging volleys of stray plasma shots. Elias ducked low, feeling the heat scorch past his neck, the air tasting of ozone and fury. Ahead, a battered starship loomed, its boarding ramp still lowered. The Drawl Prince sprinted for the controls, armor flickering under the flickering hangar lights. The insectoid aide waved frantically, guiding refugees up the ramp. The Corval bolted, each thunderous step echoing into the vast, echoing bay. As they neared the ramp, Elias glanced back one last time. Nkal appeared at the far end, silhouetted in a collapsing doorway, his translucent body quivering with hate and impotence. Elias turned away. The Corval launched up the ramp, skidding into the ship's hold. The last of the defectors scrambled aboard, and the ramp slammed shut behind them with a deep metallic roar. Engines ignited, the deck rattling beneath Elias's feet as the ship tore free from the station's gravity locks. In the cockpit, the Drawl Prince roared in triumph as the stars opened before them. Elias slid off the Corval's back, landing beside its heaving ribs. He pressed his forehead against the creature's massive head once more, their breath merging in the dim hold. A chorus of terrified but hopeful voices rose around them. Elias felt the flood of possibility wash over him, the electric promise of a galaxy about to wake up. In that echoing chamber of metal and starlight, Elias and the Corval stood side by side, the shape of a new rebellion coalescing around them. And beyond the hull, the stars waited, infinite, unwritten, free. The ship shuddered as it broke free from the Council Station's last magnetic tether. Outside, brilliant arcs of defensive plasma flared against the hull, rattling through the hold like distant thunder. Elias braced himself beside the Corval, one hand gripping the thick ridge of its neck, the other steadying a group of trembling delegates who huddled behind scattered crates. His voice remained low and calm, each word carved from resolve. The Drawl Prince roared from the cockpit, eyes aflame as he forced the vessel into a steep climb, the stars blurring past the observation panels. He shouted over his shoulder, the echo of warlike pride mixing with awe. They're trying to lock our escape vector. We have minutes at most before the orbital batteries focus. Elias turned to the Vask envoy who was crouched against the wall, his iridescent gills fluttering like frantic wings. The young alien's wide eyes shimmered with terror and something rawer, deeper, the first fragile shape of defiance. Elias knelt, his voice carrying the weight of a man who had walked beside death and returned. If you want to survive, you must choose now. Not because of me or because of him, but for yourself. Your people will follow if they see you stand. The Vask envoy swallowed hard, scales twitching. Then, with a trembling breath, he pushed himself upright, gripping the railing to steady his legs. He met Elias's gaze and nodded, a slow bloom of resolve igniting behind his transparent pupils. The Corval shifted beside Elias, lowering its massive head to eye level with the envoy. The creature's breath steamed the cold air, and its luminous eyes reflected the Vask's trembling figure. Instead of recoiling, the envoy stepped closer, extending one delicate hand. The Corval leaned forward, brushing its snout against the outstretched fingers with a tenderness that defied every legend. The envoy gasped, tears breaking loose and slipping down his narrow cheeks. Elias rose, his gaze sweeping across the hold. Around them, the young guards and delegates watched, each moment chiseling away the chains the council had welded around their hearts. A violent jolt nearly threw them off their feet. The ship's lights flickered as warning sirens shrieked overhead. The Droll Prince bellowed, his massive gauntlets punching at navigation controls. They've engaged tractor beams. We'll be dragged back within firing range if we don't sever them now. Elias sprinted toward the cockpit, the Corval surging behind him like a living avalanche. The prince twisted around, sweat glinting across his sharp obsidian features. We can't shake them. Unless we cut power to the rear stabilizers and overload the forward thrusters, we're finished. Elias looked past the prince to the distant void beyond the viewport. Stars burned like cold fires in an endless sea. He glanced at the creature at his side, their silent language vibrating between them. The Corval's muscles coiled, as if reading an unspoken invitation to leap into the unknown. He turned back to the prince. Do it. Disable the stabilizers. We'll ride the uncontrolled surge out and the Corval will anchor us. The prince hesitated, horror flickering across his usually impassive face. But he saw Elias's certainty and slammed his hand on the override panel. Sparks rained from the ceiling as power rerouted, the deck vibrating so violently it felt as if the ship might tear itself apart. The Corval roared, a sound that rang like 1,000 drums echoing in a cathedral of stars. Its claws dug into the steel floor, each talon anchoring deep as though the creature meant to drag the entire ship forward by sheer will. With a final violent shudder, the ship lurched, nose tilting sharply upward. The forward thrusters roared to life, searing blue light slicing into the void. The sudden acceleration hurled everyone backward. Elias clung to the Corval's thick ridge, his bones rattling, breath caught in his chest. Outside, the council's tractor beams snapped one by one, blue coils shattering in shimmering explosions. The ship shot free, a lone spark fleeing into the cosmic ocean, leaving behind a station ablaze with alarms and confusion. In the hold, Elias finally let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He pressed his forehead to the Corval's warm scales, every inch of him shaking. Around them, the exiles staggered to their feet, a stunned silence replacing the panicked screams. The Droll Prince staggered from the cockpit, face split in a sharp-toothed grin. We're clear. Trajectory is unstable, but we're free. The Vask envoy stepped forward, his once delicate frame now steady. His voice quivered, but it carried across the hold with unexpected power. What happens now? We have no home to return to. The council will brand us traitors. Elias turned to face them all. He felt the weight of 1,000 worlds settle on his shoulders, yet under it all pulsed something fierce and alive. He spread his arms as if to embrace the entire trembling crowd. Now we build. We create a new map of the stars, one where loyalty is chosen, not extracted. We find others who want to live as themselves, not as tools. A murmur passed through the exiles. For the first time, their eyes lifted not in fear but in wonder. The Corval shifted forward, towering above them. Its tail swept slowly along the floor, luminous eyes scanning every face. It bent its massive head low, meeting them at eye level. In that gesture, they saw not a beast of legend or a weapon of terror, but a being capable of choosing peace when violence was expected. The Droll Prince stepped forward, armor plates rattling. He lowered his head before the creature, fist striking his chest in a salute of respect. Others followed one by one. Even the most hardened guards bent their knees, pledging their spirits to a path they had never dared imagine. Elias felt the swell of that moment, a tide rising inside him. His eyes burned, not from fear, but from the raw immensity of what they had unleashed. He turned to the Corval, his voice barely more than a whisper. You've given them more than safety. You've given them a future they can shape. The Corval pressed its forehead gently against Elias's chest, an echo of that first encounter on Threxia, 7 when the creature had lain dying and Elias had stayed beside it through each labored breath. Now it stood not as a patient nor a weapon but as a brother. Above them, the ship's main screen flickered to life, static crackling before an image resolved. Nkal appeared, face twisted in rage and desperation, his translucent tendrils writhing like snakes trapped in fire. You will not escape the council's judgment, he spat, voice barely contained. You think a single human and his beast can rewrite the laws that hold this galaxy together? Elias stepped forward, his expression calm yet unyielding. We don't have to rewrite the laws. We just have to show that they were never true. Nkala's scream fractured into static as the connection cut. Silence fell like a soft cloak, interrupted only by the soft whir of ventilation and distant tremors of the ship's strained hull. Elias turned to the gathered exiles, his shoulders straight despite the tremors in his hands. He will come after us. The council will hunt us to the edge of every star. But each system we reach will hear our story. And each choice we make together will echo further than their decrees ever did. The vast envoy stepped closer, voice steadier now. We will follow you. We will become the echo that cracks their empire. The Drow prince nodded, his voice deep and resonant. Where you lead we march. Even if it's into the maw of oblivion. A final hush swept the hold. In that silence, a decision crystallized, binding them more tightly than any forced vow. The Corval shifted to Elias's side, curling its enormous tail around him in a silent promise. Elias laid a hand on its broad head, feeling the beat of its heart like a drum calling them forward. He raised his head, eyes fixed on the stars beyond the viewport, each one a distant, waiting possibility. Then let's give them a galaxy worth choosing, he said, his voice firm and alive. The ship's engines roared, the hull trembling with a new hunger. Elias felt the presence of every exile behind him, the weight of their trust anchoring his soul as surely as the Corval's massive warmth. As the stars stretched into streaming lines of light and the void welcomed them into its endless embrace, Elias understood that they had not merely escaped. They had been reborn. In that final pulse of acceleration, with the Corval beside him and new allies gathering like constellations around a single point of light, Elias closed his eyes. A universe that had once been a cage now lay ahead, infinite and unwritten. And for the first time, every heartbeat echoed with freedom.